So basically, I'm starting off with this slide. A lot of my work very much looks at the lives of people and places through abrupt change or loss, and then renewal. I think growing up in an immigrant household and moving a lot, and just with some of the experiences I had, which are very much reflected in this current show, I've had these, I guess, these moments where, faced with change, it opens up a completely new perspective or way of seeing. So in a lot of the work that I'm making, I try to play with that space and open up questions. And they're usually questions of, all the things that we find to be stable in our society, like family or the environment or our institutions, when changes happen. And I think we all really relate to that right now as we're going through pandemic and so many changes. It makes you think about, how do we define these things? So in this particular show, I'm really looking at home, like, is home a place, a physical place, or is it a relationship, and what happens when it's no longer present? And I can talk about the show briefly. I don't have slides of it. So that's the general context. So this slide that you're looking at, just keeping that in mind, this idea of change, or how does one ground or place themselves. I often use in my work strategies of humor, or I would say, or like my earlier work, also subversion. So on this image on the right, I am Canadian. I've been living in the States for 20 plus years. I'm a dual citizen right now, and when I first moved for school, it was really interesting to live in Philadelphia and to see how there are so many things that are culturally similar but also radically different. So I made these resident alien spacesuits and had other Canadian friends walking around to try, and we just would create these funny scenarios. And I really enjoyed the unexpected things that happened. So I'm not going to talk in too much depth about some of this early work. This piece was at a local space called Art of This, and what you're seeing on the wall is, like when a restaurant is maybe closing down, or maybe a new place is coming in, you'll see people will put paper up on the windows. And so these are all screen printed want ads or lost and found articles that you would see in a newspaper. So this was during the time of the 2008 financial crisis. And it really, a lot of conversations around foreclosure or business closing was coming about. And we had this opportunity to show this space. It was me and my friend Jennifer Danos. And this is the inside of the space. So Jen and I, often when I'm working with the space and with my collaborator, we've done several shows together. We are both interested in ways that you can speak to or change the gallery. So the floor, if you knew this space, it was a painted gray floor. And it's not a great slide, but Jen does these contact paper installations where when you walked in, it looked like a brand new renovated wooden floor, but it's actually contact paper. So when people walked in, they were like, oh, it upset their idea of what a gallery is. It's more of a kind of, it looked like a space that's waiting for something to happen. So this idea of foreclosure and change and capturing that moment was what we were going for. And then there's the language in the want ads. So from that earlier work, I started noticing I was making a lot of wearable work or installation-based things. And I started thinking about growing up with my parents. And my dad had this frequent photography project he would do where he would place himself in front of this bookshelf and take photographs and then send them back to Croatia. My parents are from the former Yugoslavia. And this was a ritual that he would do. But in the behind the scenes, that shelf was something that he built. He wasn't a furniture maker. He literally repurposed wood, and a lot of these things he found at garage sales. And this was not typically how he would dress, but he would dress up for these photos. And sometimes he wouldn't even bother putting on proper pants. He would have, gym shorts or something, and he would, set up the photograph. And so this idea of constructing an image or constructing an identity that you want to share broadly, or was something that was inspired by this. And I asked him, not too long ago, just why he did this, like if he was trying to promote some idea of having arrived to America and succeeding and having a certain degree of wealth. And he's like, no, I do it for myself. Like it was self-affirming for him. So this idea carried into this series of work of this fictitious artist. So this idea of making oneself, inventing oneself is something that I'm personally really interested in. I imagine like with a younger generation, we're constantly inventing ourselves online. So this, I think it kind of speaks to different generations. For me, it was very much a feeling of, growing up in an immigrant household, sometimes you don't, I feel a little bit like I thought of myself as an outsider, like I didn't necessarily have the same food or the right clothes, and I was very conscious of that. And now moving a lot, moving from Canada and all over the States, you notice there's these certain cultural codes of how we talk and hold ourselves. And so I thought inventing an artist for an exhibition could be interesting, where what you're seeing is not the artist's work, but you're seeing all of his exhibition posters. And I wrote newspaper articles and essentially built up this whole myth about this artist who, at the cusp of his mainstream success, he decided to remove himself from the art world. So his name is Jan Zeilander, and he lives in northern Minnesota in a cabin, and he sells his work on eBay. So all of the posters have a fiction, and this was shown at the MAP gallery in the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. And this project I've toured around to different spaces in the US and Canada, and essentially there's this infrastructure of a curatorial statement or newspaper articles, and sometimes I do performance where I present this artist. And for me, it's an opportunity to think about, what is our relationship to gallery spaces? What is this character's relationship to the art world, or through, there's a number of different myths just about his relationship to nature, etc. And I think that this was for me a way to unpack, I think a little bit of my, again, and this is probably very much me, it's like my outsider feeling about the art world. Like when you're an artist, you feel like or I at least feel this, I'm very cognizant of presenting or performing an idea, of a poetic idea, and how the art world can be very elitist sometimes. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but can be very, I guess there's like a different class system. I went to a very high-end art school where all of my teachers wanted me to be a New York working artist, and I was very interested in community work, so I think that this is me unpacking this a little bit. And also just like making yourself, right? Like as you're young and you're developing your work, how do you situate yourself in these environments? So for me, taking on a character was a useful way to unpack it. And also there's something about printmaking here that, I think printmaking is still sometimes thought of as possibly secondary or not as important as painting or sculpture. So the idea of highlighting the poster, I have this whole dialogue around the intense following all these posters that are made. I suggest that they're made by several different artists and people, and that they were all following this artist was a way to, in a way, amplify or make printmaking a little bit more important. So I'm showing different styles. And I think I have something like 9 or 10 different poster artists, but they're all produced by me. And then I had a lot of fun. I love language, so I had a lot of fun playing with language and image with this work. And I think this one kind of crystallizes, again, like, a bit of this conflict. Like sometimes when I talk to other artists, some of my friends were like, oh, are you excited for your opening? And I'm like, yes, I love talking to people. But a lot of us are pretty introverted, and this thing that you make in your studio and then you put out there, there's a real dissonance between those spaces. So, there's some of that in there. Okay, I'm gonna try to move along a little faster. So this idea of constructing or creating, I think, creating realities is I think, so important to me. We're in a time now where it's so easy to project an idea and to have someone believe it. Like with the Xylander work, a lot of people believed that Xylander was real, and they would, just with the existing information in the gallery, I went a couple of times and would overhear people educating their friends on who Xylander was. Or when I would perform and say, oh, I'm a curator and I'm shopping this artist, these posters representing this artist who's no longer making, and this is all the artifacts that we have, people really believed that he was real. So I wanted to continue playing with this idea in the context of socially engaged work. So this project, The Commons, I'm looking, and it's another invented scenario where I'm looking at kids in an art school who create a space for community engagement and exchange, but as they're constructing this space, they accidentally get locked into it. And then they have to realize community for real, because they have to survive this space. And so at this time, I'm using a lot of humor, a lot of subversion, and I was going through a period where I was just really trying to understand my values and work in the context of the art world. And tangential to this, I do a lot of community-based practice in social service agencies and community, like churches and things like that. In those two worlds, again, just different dialogues. So I'm trying to understand like the space and gallery. So these are just some of the drawings like that came out of that. So these are some of the activities they were drawing to kind of bide their time, like making lists of what will I do when I get out of here. And then I made an artist book that recounts this episode. So there's a campus safety report of what happened and how they got out, and this is an image of the three students that are, building this a model of the space. And then after a while, I started feeling like I wasn't so much. This work I had been making for a while felt a little bit too removed from myself, and I was thinking about how community-based exchange and dialogue. That I've been working on, usually around one's identity. I work a lot with youth, and youth making work to reinforce or have an understanding of themselves. I wanted to get a little closer to my own narrative. So I started doing a deep dive into, why fiction and why do I make up these scenarios. And it really kind of came back to that realization of, just this outsiderness feeling that I have, that I'm trying to articulate. And in my family history, I have a number of stories of displacement. My parents had to leave Croatia under duress, so I didn't have my family, and a lot of my family in Croatia had died during World War II. So this piece is another collaboration with Jennifer Danos and myself. Jen did the contact paper floor, and it's a mirror of the ceiling, but it's torqued or twisted so that it's going up onto the wall. And she wanted to create this jumble. So we were looking at cartography, maps, and how borders are being redrawn. And then I did the prints on the wall. And the prints on the wall, you'll notice there's a lot of movement in them. I'm recounting a story of my grandfather who had been, the part of Croatia my parents were from had been annexed and was a part of Italy. So during the war, he was shipping arms for Italy, but then his ship got sunk and he just wanted to get back to his family. So he could have stayed in this village that he was in, but he decided to make the trek back home. And then when he came back home, the villagers, there had been a shift in power, and the partisans told him that he would be fighting for the other side, essentially. So he started fighting for the other side, and then at the end of this period, he was working as a medic, and then he was assassinated by his own people. So the complexity of that, of like there's these personal narratives of someone just trying to get back home to be with his family and just trying to survive, and these shifting borders. And after this, this part of where my parents were from was no longer part of Italy. It became Yugoslavia. So it's complicated. It's just very complicated. So these are some of the images. I hope you can see them okay. It's a bit bright. So this is an image of my grandfather. I'm imagining him sleeping on this. And the thing is, I don't even know, how long it took him to get back to the village, but I'm imagining him trekking, and I'm thinking about the cycles of the moon, and the cycles of the moon have my grandmother's face in them. And then there's some poetry and writing in there, to talk about that constellation. I'm starting to notice that there's just a lot of movement that I'm trying to imply. So this kind of leads me at some point to do artist books, which you'll see here. So this is an artist book. An artist book is kind of like a gallery or a collection of images and text in a book that upset the normal ways that we read them. So this book pulls out to about 58 inches and is like an accordion, if you can imagine that visually. And there's images on one side and text on the other. And this project is revolving around a shift or change in, I guess, just myself in relationship to the world. So I'm thinking about the relationship with my son and just how motherhood changes, how you exist, because all of a sudden you're really hyper focused on this person and keeping them alive and everything. And I think as someone who had a lot of time prior to that to make work or do what I want, I was an older mom, I was like, wow, this is really a lot of like work and stuff. And so I was going through that, you could say in a way, a little bit of loss of your former self, but then opening yourself up to this most beautiful and amazing experience. So I'm going to show you a video of the book. Yeah, so all the images, so this is really important, all the images are made by my son when he was 3 years old, and it's that thing, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, where I was trying to do an email for work, and he grabbed my phone and he started like just documenting everything in the yard. And then I guess I'm just trying to recount this experience of like initial frustration, but then just really enjoying him in that moment. So, and then when I saw the photos, I'm like, he did a 360 degree of the yard. So this is what you're seeing. And then I'll orate the poem that I wrote for this. So it's panorama, a phone hijacked, a thought spun out, a list never made, a correspondence lost, a lifeline left to wander, a day's shapeless conclusion, like so many days, of unwanted advice on how to remain productive, whatever the cost, of quiet and untranslatable gifts, of knowing each songbird's call because he does, of finding bits of treasure we keep entombed, of yielding to the yard alive and green. I guess I like to talk about change or rupture or loss, but that at the same time as everything that you get out of it, all the new questions, the renewal, the openness to other things, because life goes on, right? And you figure out and you find your way. So the last piece I'll show you is I have this currently up at MCAD right now in our faculty show. And this is a series of objects that I've been carrying with me from my home that I grew up in with my family. And they all exist in a box. And I don't have a lot of these objects out. And I've moved, and it's really partly because I've moved a lot. I've moved 5 or 6 times. I've been 3 different cities, once out of the country, and I think I'm trying to knit back, like, where do these objects belong in my current home? So these, there's these very colorful backgrounds. They're all made with different printmaking processes, like screen print or monotype. And then these are polymer gravure prints that are glued on top. And it's essentially a photograph that then is translated to a photo plate. And it gets a really just rich tonal value. So when you look at it, it has, you would say, maybe a nostalgic or a very kind of, like distant feel about it. And I wanted that to be juxtaposed against this colorful ground. So the questions are, again, like, where is home? Where do these things belong as you shift from, one life to another, or you age and change? Like, how do old things remain and that continuum continue? Especially in the context of foreclosure. So this home that I grew up in was foreclosed, and then my mom passed away shortly afterwards, and it has been that rupture and then all the subsequent moving. And I think even the prehistory of that moment, just like the breakage within family has begged a lot of questions about how do we place ourselves in the world. And as an artist, I feel like I have such a gift to be able to, in a way, reconstruct these spaces, even if they're temporal or they're up maybe for the course of a show or an event, or maybe it's a community facilitation, to really just have a dialogue about what these things mean. So these are the slides that I have. I think I might have just one more. And then I really welcome your questions, or I've been talking a lot, so I would be much more interested in hearing from you, but this maybe will give you some more context to the show that I have right now. So, which is very much an homage. It's very much an homage to my mom, single mom, trying to, keep us going in our house. And, even if, again, the context is the loss of this space, I really want to celebrate. So a lot of these prints, celebrate her and her spirit, and again, I want there to be a sense of that precarity, like the loss is there, but I don't want it to be forefronted, or like the only part of the conversation when you experience things like this. So so this is me. That's what I'm doing. Thanks for coming out and giving me this time to share some of my thoughts. I hope it was clear enough. It's been a long day, so yeah. So questions or? Yeah.
So you use text a lot in your work, because I was noticing that out here and these ones too.
Yeah.
Which I find really intimidating, because I was feel like I don't have training text or text. So I'm curious, like, what's your history with text? Like, where do you come at, or else, like, what do you think about when you're writing it?
Oh yeah, I didn't really talk about that. My dad is a really big storyteller, and so I grew up, with that. And I also, he is a big lover of film, and I originally wanted to go to film school. That's what because I wanted to tell stories, and then I fell in love with print. I think the slowness of print and the materials, so I got a little seduced by those things. So, but I guess I should have said it earlier, like, all of these are based in fictions or actual memories. So I think story and narrative is there. So for me, writing is, really natural. I'm still working on, like, how do I put those together effectively with images. So, you know, the artist book I think was the one I was most excited about. I am excited about some of the text in the show with the wallpaper piece, because I have a lot of writing about this work, like, you know, trying to capture or trying to spin home out of a video game or an experience out on the soccer field, like these very ephemeral things. And to me, words kind of capture, or poetry captures that ephemeral, you're like evoking a moment or a sense or that you know, so I hope that answers your question. So that in combination with images.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my mom, like some of the words that are in there, I'm just really evoking my mom's voice, because the words are cheap. When we were growing up, you know, I mean, she was really, like all parents, you know, you're struggling, but a single parent is hard. And, you know, I would say, oh yeah, I'm going to clean this, or I'll do this thing that she wanted me to do. And she would smoke a cigarette and say, words are cheap, Natasha, words are cheap. So that's like, I love these sayings, right? Like you, so I just wanted to celebrate that. So sometimes it's an homage. Yeah. So, and thank you for giving me this space to share a little bit about what I'm thinking about. It's been so nice to talk to you individually too. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.